Kyrie Edwards here, running in Maryland's 4th Congressional District. It's another video about Iran. There's also been reports that Iran used a hypersonic missile to pierce the Iron Dome, and which is not actually a dome, in case you don't know. It's just a missile defense system. They fire missiles to intercept missiles, and when you think of it that way, it actually seems like a bit childish, but horribly expensive. And the Iron Dome is almost out of missiles. The USS Ford reportedly is almost out of missiles, and Iran is not. And their plan has been to overwhelm the missile defense system and then possibly use hypersonic missiles and other missiles that they've hinted that they have. And they say they want to use weapons that the U.S. doesn't know that they have. They have some pretty advanced drones. They've already used one of them to destroy a radar in Bahrain, I believe it was, where the U.S. Fifth Fleet was until recently. They relocated them in anticipation of this action and in anticipation of Iran's attacks, retaliatory attacks. Because again, Iran was attacked first, and there were peace talks held in Oman, I believe, that the U.S. backed away from, possibly because Iran had actually done what the U.S. had asked them to do, had called the bluff, had said that they would give up the rest of their, enriched uranium or even some of the unenriched uranium, and allow for monitoring and mostly of the sites that Donald Trump claimed were obliterated. And the U.S. either didn't think that would be enough because what they wanted was total chaos in the arena, or to install a leader that can control another king, is what it seems that they're aimed for. But candidly, it seems that Israel asked the U.S. to do this on their behalf, and possibly threaten to take matters into their own hands. And for all those people who are saying we're doing this because because they're a theocracy and we can't stand for that, well, I feel like the United States wants to be a theocracy on Tuesdays when people want to call into C-SPAN and say we're a Christian nation, and that's why we can't stand for any of this stuff. If we're a Christian nation, newsflash, that makes us a theocracy as well. If your rationale for not passing new laws is that our law should be based off of the Christian faith, then that's what a theocracy is. Also, Israel wanted to have this invasion to coordinate with the religious holiday Purim, where the story goes, it's basically a story about them preventing genocide. But they have used religion to both defend their actions against their neighbors by saying it's their holy land and their God's chosen people, and so their actions are ordained by God, and so whatever they do is right because it's godly. It's very theocratic. And two, have claimed that any attacks against them is ungodly or satanic, or use some other kind of sometimes really racist language against mostly Muslims, but sometimes Hindus as well. So, no, two theocracies. And a third, Vatican City, it's the head of the papacy, the Catholic faith. There's, ornate, if you don't want to call it a castle, estate. You should Google it and see how much of the world's gold is thought to be there. It's a really wealthy place. They technically don't have an army, but only technically. I don't know. It seems like that's a theocracy as well, and no one is, if any of those three places, the United States, Israel, or Vatican City, were bombed or invaded, or their leaders were killed, or we went in and kidnapped their scientists, people would understandably think that that's wrong, even if the person doing that was like, well, they're a theocracy. We don't like that. We want someone to be more of a worldly leader and not base their decisions off of God, because we've been there, and normal mortals can't defend against actions that a man has said is ordained by God. So we dispense with all that, except for when it's convenient. So that's not a good reason. Also, it's not a good reason to say they may have a nuclear bomb one day, and so we have to kill a bunch of people just to stop them because they may want to kill a bunch of people. Even if you add to that part them chanting death to America, well, if we stopped bombing them and killing their people, or supporting Israel for killing their people, maybe they wouldn't be chanting death to America. Just saying. People in Britain are chanting death to America because we're not killing people in Britain, right? We're killing people in Iran. And I don't know. I've met plenty of Iranian Americans and Persians, and seem delightful. No one's come up to me and told me they want me to die because I'm from America. I do think it's mostly imagined. But say you don't. Say you think that we can't have that stand. We've made plenty of friends with plenty of other people that had those views in the past, and now we're cool. Germany and Japan are staunch allies. We seceded from Britain, and still one of our strongest allies and trading partners. Probably couldn't survive. Our two countries probably couldn't survive without each other. So I don't know why Iran is different. We backed them in their war against Iraq at one point until we changed our mind, and then backed Iraq. So, besties one day and enemies the next. But whatever. Maybe you think they really hate us and think we're evil and want to kill every American and every Israel or every Jewish person in the world. Maybe you think that. I don't see them saying that. And I think that might even be a little bit racist to assume that every person in Iran wants to, are monsters and want to kill everybody. But okay. Israel has a nuke, has more than one nuke, and they've also threatened to destroy Iran. I don't think they normally chant death to America, but they make it clear what happens to politicians that don't support their interests or support their genocide or war or constant invasion and irritation and escalation of violence in the region. So I don't know. Are they more stable or less stable? Because they've actually been attacking in the area. And you can say Iran's funded Hezbollah and Hamas, and those two groups have killed people, and they have. Though I do think that combining the two groups together, lumping them together, is probably misguided. Hamas seems like it's an easier argument to claim that they're a terrorist group. They do very terroristy things, like blowing up buses and stuff. Hezbollah seems to be basically a branch of the Lebanese military, and doesn't exclude their actions. There's plenty of military, including ours, who have done horrible things in the service of their nations or ideals, and sometimes even war crimes. But just calling them a terrorist group just makes it I don't know. Let's not play pretend. Well, yes, Iran sent money and advisors and trained them, but also they usually stay in Lebanon. They usually defend Lebanon. The people, Israel soldiers that they've killed have mostly died in Lebanon. And Israel has killed far more of them than they've killed Israel. I don't think it should always be a numbers game. I don't. But one state in the region is the agitator, and one state is put in the kind of unfortunate role of being the defender. And I think their way of collective punishment isn't, in itself is a war crime, but also they're hitting somewhat legitimate targets. They shouldn't bomb hotels. They shouldn't fire missiles randomly into the middle of Tel Aviv. Though I think they will point out that they are doing so because that is where Israel has decided to put their military headquarters and such. And also, as an American, I don't know if we can really say anything because we've bombed plenty of civilian sites. We blew up a school yesterday. If we're going back further to like World War II, we dropped 2 nuclear weapons on civilian areas because we didn't think any of the military targets were big enough or had enough people left in them because we had already killed plenty. And it's not like we stopped that logic with World War II. We just haven't used nuclear weapons anymore, even though people have advocated for them. So I don't know. I think on the internet I see some people try to do the same thing did in Venezuela, and we'll see how this week goes and see if there's attacks or invasion of Cuba. Hopefully not. But the explanation and rationale that people seem most comfortable with is these are bad people, so our actions are justified, and Donald Trump's a bad person. I think if another country invaded America or even had a limited military action and started bombing shit in DC, I think we would be upset and rightfully point out that being a bad person or being a bad leader, or even sometimes being a dictator, doesn't mean that regular everyday civilians should die for no reason. I just think at the very least there should be a plan and congressional approval before the conflict starts, and maybe you let peace have a chance, and maybe you stop giving aid to Israel so they stop invading places and stop blowing up stuff and actually have to make treaties with their neighbors. They've managed to make treaties with almost all of their neighbors, by the way, except for Iran, where they have not tried. And it's because Iran has a military that is almost as powerful as their own. And it's, quite large. And also, traditionally, Iran has gotten along well with its neighbors. Now, some of that is through coercion rather than legitimate partnership. But some of that coercion, and not to excuse it, but some of that coercion also came after the United States actions, toppling, some regimes like in Iraq, destabilizing Afghanistan, toppling the dictator, if you want to call Gaddafi a dictator, in Libya. And then, civil war in Syria. Which Iran made worse, and same with Yemen. And so it's not like I'm saying that they're a perfect country or anything like that. They mess stuff up too. But one could argue they are doing things that are reactive, and the U.S. is doing things that cause the situations in the first place. That's all I'm saying. The U.S. it also chooses when to care about human rights violations. If it's a human rights violation in a country that gives us cheap oil, we don't. We look the other way. We look the other way on genocide. We fund that shit, especially in Gaza. But if it's something like, Iran being accused of shooting into crowds or abusing women in prisons, or they very credibly torture their prisoners of war, or the religious police force will arrest people and beat them for how they're dressed, how they talk, how they act in public. There's not a whole lot of privacy. I'm not talking about Iran, but a lot of this stuff happens in the U.S. too. So I'm just saying Iran isn't a utopia, but neither is America. So that's it. I'm hoping that now that the missiles are starting to run low on America's end and on Israel's end, and there have been credible reports that at least 3 U.S. soldiers have died. Not sure where or how, but through the course of the war. Um, maybe we'll have Donald Trump backing off a little bit. I do kind of doubt it, but one can hope. One can hope. I am increasingly confident to say that there's perhaps no just wars. You know, you can defend yourself, and sometimes you can intervene to help others. I think we should have intervened for quite a few genocides, for example. And you might hear that and think some of what I said is hypocritical. Because some might argue that if you intervene early on before it becomes a genocide or mass violence against your own people, then maybe that's ideal. But I don't think the only options are launch airstrikes and kill a bunch of civilians and kill the leader of a country or do nothing. But I do think that the fact that you get to war in the first place is a failure, and so if thus it's not just. So this is a failure, and hopefully we can claw something from this. We can maybe actually fix the War Powers Act. If you read through my policies, I take a stab at changing the War Powers Act, updating it. The Constitution gives Congress the sole war-making powers. It gives them the power to start and stop wars. And also, they are in charge of the budgets and ratifying treaties. The president is really only supposed to conduct how the war is done, not when it starts, not when it stops, not any of that. But we've allowed the president to do what they want, and not just Trump, but pretty much all U.S. presidents. And a lot of people have used the War Powers Act that we have now as more of a permission. It's written in a way to where people have interpreted it that it gives the president permission to pretty much do war wherever he wants, as long as he reports to Congress within the reporting deadline. And yeah, I don't think that's what it was. I don't think that was the intent of the act, and it's definitely not the intent of the Constitution. And at any time, Congress can change that and remind the president that he doesn't actually have the authority on this matter. And I think impeachment is in order, but also I think some immediate cessation of the war is something that Congress should do. Changing the War Powers Act to make it so the president has to come to you first to get signed off on a war, clarifying what's a war and what's a policing action or intelligence mission. I also think we should have a reporting requirement for intelligence agencies. They can't just conduct a shadow war or overthrow countries and Congress doesn't find out for 50 years. No, that's not okay. Like, you can't. The Constitution clearly gives that power to Congress because Congress is closer to the people. You have the House of Representatives, which right now is elected every 2 years, supposed to be out doing town halls and living in the neighborhoods that they represent. They don't really do that. That's why you should elect me, because I will actually do that. And I would just be one member of the 435, which we should expand. But it would be partially symbolic and partially a proof point that people such as myself make better members and more representative, and also are closer to the people that would actually be getting drafted and sent to war. I think I'm at the secondary draft age now, so I wouldn't be primary. I think they do 18 to 25 and then 26 to 39. And then depending on your specialty, like if you're in college, if you graduate college and stuff like that, you might get some priority. So, to my understanding, I'd be in that second group. I'm college educated, but I'm 34. Um, I did run 5K this year, so maybe I should hide those that proof. um, I kid because we have to joke or we cry, but yeah, people that are actually affected by these decisions should be the ones making these decisions, and Congress was given the war making power with that in mind. And the executive, started out with a U.S. general, George Washington, becoming the first president, and we've had a few presidents that have been in the military, and I don't know if there's actually much evidence that they, do less military stuff while they're in office. But I feel like people react with the training and expertise that they have. So um, we had Washington, Jackson. You had the other founding fathers too. They fought, but I don't know if they were generals off the top of my head. I don't know if Adams was a general, but you definitely had Washington, Jackson, Grant, and I'm skipping some people. I think Tyler and Pierce were also generals, but I don't remember much about their service, so sorry. And Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, and I think I'm also skipping some people, but whatever. Eisenhower, and then Bush was in the CIA, head of the CIA, and then Bush Jr. Was he in the Air Force? Or did he just do camo? Or did he just was in the Air Force? Anyway, we've had plenty of people that were in the military, had military experience, but it didn't prevent them from wanting to invade places or make war kinder, if you can even do that. So I think sometimes people will point at civilian presidents or presidents who have never been in the military, and they're like, oh, they're bumbling because they don't know what it's like to put on a uniform. And humbly, I think people probably can imagine there's probably lots of stuff that they're like, yeah, of course, never did that, don't know what it's like to be shot at while you're fighting for your country and stuff. But you can probably imagine it's not good, right? I don't know if you necessarily need to know more than that to know that it's a bad thing to send people to do that, especially if you don't have a good reason. So I do think people overestimate a little bit what that service does to the president, and then underestimate how much I don't know, morality is probably what we need. But also, anyways, get back on the subject. The president, right now, we've given him too much power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Congress is supposed to have that power, and it's supposed to be diffused over 535 people. They vote yes or no, and the argument has been we shouldn't make war in public because our enemy has time to prepare. I mean, military planning is just something people do all the time. The U.S. does it even if we are at peace and no one's attacked us for a very long time using military force. So I think that's a silly reason. But whatever. It doesn't have to be a public vote. People can go in back rooms and figure things out, and then inform the public that we're going to war after they've launched attacks or whatever. That's pretty much what they do now. It's just the president's usually making the decisions, and that's pretty much how Operation Iraqi Freedom worked. George Bush, to his small credit, did go in front of Congress and he manufactured evidence and stuff, but he asked for buy-in and support, and they voted yes, with some very few exceptions, and he sent the ships and the Air Force and the people, and they start blowing stuff up after an artificial deadline, and it worked fine. The invasion worked fine initially. We to say we won is difficult, but we achieved the military goal, such as it was, and so I don't see why that's a reason against it. But then you look at someone like, I'll pick one of my favorites, Obama. didn't ask for congressional approval to send in the Air Force to attack Libya, for example. Did build an international coalition, and manufacturing evidence seems harsh. It seems like the allies that worked with us didn't really need much evidence or need prodding. It seems like they were all on board with killing someone they went to kill for quite some time, but they did the thing, they accomplished the goal, and then they didn't have a plan, they didn't have buy-in from the public, they didn't have congressional approval, though there were plenty of people in Congress that were happy about this, like Lindsey Graham, and it was a disaster. We pulled out. It's Libya is not freer, and it's not doing better. It's doing worse, and so I feel like those are two ways we can approach things. But you may note that the issue is just war is bad, and there's no fixing that. So even if you have the War Powers Act, if you go to war in the 21st century, I'm just not sure you can have many positive outcomes. Because a lot of our wars have been about killing one guy, and then we kill that guy, but we're still there. Or we're there to find weapons of mass destruction that don't exist. And so there's just vague goals that you can't actually meet. And so there's no off-ramp to leave. Or there's no justification, and you know that. The public knows that. The soldiers know that. But you still have to make something up in order to, it's use your presence. And that just kills morale. That causes some long-term effects. People don't like to talk about blowback, but, Timothy McVeigh came back and started blowing things up. He was in the armed services, and he's not the only one. He's just probably probably still the most famous one. Oklahoma City bummer. I don't know. Could talk about this for quite some time, but to wrap up, war is bad, and it really doesn't matter the reason, but we can demand changes for this conflict and future conflicts. We can have Congress reclaim the power that was already given to them in the Constitution, and we can also elect different people so that we don't keep getting in these cycles. You shouldn't really have to organize your friends and family and neighbors to call your congressperson to figure out what they feel about a war, because this is their job. The timing is sometimes inconvenient, and I get that, and I get if Donald Trump declares war on a country across the world at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't expect our representative to make a statement at 2:05. That's not realistic. But the next day, it should say something interesting. It shouldn't just be like, well, that sucks. And I get that everyone wants to be on message and call things a war of choice, but I don't know. Unless it's a self-defense, they're all war of choices, and we've had a lot of those. And so Trump's not unique in that regard. He's unique in the fact that he attacked a country that is well capable of attacking back. And that's a bit frightening. So stay safe.